on the FEM lecture series. So this is a part of FEM program by Katerina Belaruska Foundation. And the mission of our foundation to give young women the tools to lead with the confidence and, of course, to develop their soft skills and leader skills. So today's we will have our lectures, and we invited two interesting and beautiful women, first of all, and interesting speakers. Annetta Benzar, senior writer at Forbes Cyprus and host of the Future Makers podcast. Annetta will show us how storytelling can help you understand yourself and build deeper connections with others. So it's interesting how we will move forward from our physical process about all the hormones and this interesting how the storytelling and this tool can help us express us when we can't understand ourselves, but we need to express ourselves. It's also very interesting. So Annetta, the floor is yours. And of course, we have some questions previously from the girls. I think we will, if you are okay with that, you can answer on them first. And then if we will have some answers here from girls online, we'll also cover them. Thank you. So let's start.
Thank you, Tatiana. Yeah, so thank you as well for the introduction. I'm really excited to kind of dive into one of my favorite topics, which is storytelling, vulnerability, connection to ourselves, connection to others, and how that kind of all these threads kind of come together. So my name is Annetta Benzar. I am a writer, a journalist, and also now a podcaster. So my job is literally to talk to people and give a platform for others to share their story, which is very ironic. I actually had one of my former teachers, my English literature teacher back in high school, come onto the podcast and chat about, because she is now a children's book award-winning writer. But one of the chats we had was actually about me and who I was, or at least who who she thought I was back in high school. And I was the shyest kid in the class. Like I remember we had drama class every Tuesday, and she was one of our drama teachers. And I would make any excuse under the sun to avoid that class. Like I would skip school on Tuesdays just not to have to go onto stage, to have to act, to have to do anything that would actually be involved sharing myself, having people watch me. The idea of being watched or like talking about my story was just terrifying. And later on, in university, one of my lecturers actually got our group to attend an open mic, which is an evening where people come onto the stage for like 3 to 5 minutes and share their poetry, their written stories, or just say a story in front of an audience. And he signed me up without telling me. 5 minutes before I was supposed to go on, he kind of nudged me and said, by the way, you're on in 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to come up with a story. And I was like, okay. And I did. I shared a very, very personal story. And and something clicked. I was hooked from then on. And from then on, I've hosted open mic nights. I've been in 3 short films, and now I host a video cast, which involves me having to be on camera 3 to 4 times a week. So I am very, very passionate about storytelling and how that can build us and connect us with ourselves and kind of bring ourselves out there to be vulnerable, but also not feel exposed by that. So I have a very short presentation, and within that presentation, there will be some more interactive elements. And so I'm very excited to get into this. Let me just start sharing Microsoft PowerPoint. Oh, okay. Can we all see
Yes, yes,
the
all good.
PowerPoint?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. So, before we begin with the PowerPoint, I want to say something really, really important. My workshop is not designed to make you tell your deepest, darkest secrets. We are an open, I want to be an open space. If you want to share something very personal, you are very welcome to, but I am not here to make you feel exposed or naked without you wanting to. This is not a workshop where vulnerability means telling everyone everything. You are always allowed to pass. You're always allowed to share a lighter story, a story that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable or worried of feeling too exposed. That is not our purpose here. You are allowed to write something instead and write it only for yourself. You're allowed to choose your own boundary. This workshop is for you and for the point of the journey you are at now and a journey that you are leading. It's not my journey, it's your journey. For me, vulnerability means something very I guess, simplistic in a way. It is the courage to look inward and let one true thing about yourself and from yourself be seen, and sharing that with compassion and boundaries towards yourself and towards other people. So there's this trauma psychiatrist that I do admire, and he has been using this phrase that I am connecting to at this moment in my life, and that is called compassionate curiosity. So when you are thinking about stories of yourself and looking at yourself, he encourages us to do that, not with anger, shame, or frustration, but to be curious about ourselves, almost like, like a detective, and ask, what is going on inside me? And do that in a spirit of not judgment, not pressure, just compassion and curiosity. Okay. Oh, so, so the what we are going to be doing today is to arrive into this kind of safe space. We are here not just to share our stories, but also to listen and to absorb the story and respond. We're going to define a few words. We're going to write privately a story, and also to share at whatever level we feel comfortable with. We're going to choose a deeper truth about ourselves and leave with one I sentence. And you're going to kind of understand what I mean by that later on. So I want to start with a little warm up, and that is, I want you to think of one word you feel when I say tell your story. There are a few examples I give you there, a few adjectives that could be proud, nervous, curious, exposed, excited, afraid, ready. But you don't feel like you are bound to those words. So what I want you to do is write in the chat what you feel when I tell you to tell your story. That can be also defined in any way that you want to define it, but just write in the chat what you are feeling when I tell you to tell your story. I'm just gonna give you a few seconds to do that. So some of the responses, so when you hear tell your story, I'm getting a lot of nervous energy, which is fine. I personally, every time I go in to share a story, whether that is on stage or with new people, I get very nervous. I get very shaky. And this is something I've been doing for quite a few years. It is not, it is something that is us. It helps us to these emotions help us to feel a little bit more alert to what we are doing. So thank you for sharing how you're feeling. And we are going to explore how we can kind of use those emotions to actually be able to share a story. So I mentioned to you that first time during an open mic, I shared a very, very personal story that I was probably thinking of that during that period of my life, those last few weeks. And when I was put on the spot, it was the only story I could come up with at that point. And so I actually want to share that story, and yeah, allow myself to be vulnerable with you. So as you can see, there is a picture of Robin Hood, and the theme of my story was Robin Hood. Um, one of a very, very early memory I have is of my father reading a bedtime story to me. And he would read a lot of adventure stories to me back when I was around 3 or 4. But one of his favorite stories was about Robin Hood and how Robin Hood was always this superhero and somebody he admired. How incredible this person was, that he was risking his life to, what he would say, take from the rich and give to the poor. And then one night I remember he turns to me and he says, I have to tell you a secret. And I was like, what? In my little four-year-old voice. And he's like, well, you can't tell anybody, not even your mom, not even your grandparents, not even your friends or your toys. You have to keep the secret. And I was like, yeah, of course. And he said, I am the real Robin Hood. I, whatever I do, people think I'm a bad person, that maybe what I do is like a criminal, but actually what I'm doing is for the good of people. But you can't tell anybody this. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. My dad, he's Robin Hood. And for years, I believed that. I believed that my dad was Robin Hood. We'd moved to Cyprus, where I live now at that point, so when I was around 5 years old. And my father didn't live with us. He stayed back in Minsk. And, there we talked, but our talking would become less and less. And I thought, okay, that's because, he's busy. He is busy saving people. He is saving people who can't be saved, that they are oppressed, or maybe they have a lot of problems because, the actual bad people, the actual rich bad people, they're taking all this from the poor people, and somebody needs to rescue them. But, around me, my family would say, your dad's not actually that great a person. You shouldn't be admiring him as much as you are admiring him. But I still had that idea that my dad is somebody special. My dad is a good person, despite everything everybody else was telling me. And then I remember during one of my birthdays, my dad called me. And I don't know how much you know of Eastern European countries, especially like Belarus, Russia, Ukraine. I'm Belarusian Ukrainian originally, but they have a culture of alcoholism, and it particularly affects the men of those countries. And unfortunately, my father did suffer from alcoholism, and uh, he called me very, very drunk on my birthday, and he's like, Annetta, um, do you still believe I am a good person? And at that point I was a teenager, and it started to feel that shame. He'd become a story he'd become a story I stopped sharing with people when people would ask me about, where's your dad? Or, where does he live, or anything about like my family. I started hiding that. It became something I just wouldn't want to share. It was just too vulnerable. I felt I looking at all my friends who, come from a family with like two parents, or, whose family are just like so open, and don't seem to have any of these deep, dark secrets that they're hiding. There is a lot of shame in me coming forward and saying, one, yeah, my dad doesn't live with us. My parents are divorced, but also, and that's because my dad's an alcoholic and he's going through all these mental health struggles. I didn't have those words, but what I did have was a lot of shame in that. And it was a story I kept hidden. So when he made that phone call, I, I stopped. I, it just, I couldn't stop from saying the words I did. And those words were, no, Dad, you know what? I don't believe you're Robin Hood. I believe you are actually one of the bad guys. And it was those were the last words I shared with him. From then on, I stopped answering his phone calls until, unfortunately, a few years later, his sickness took him. And it was this was one of the stories I kept hidden for a very, very long time. But it was a story that I felt needed to be shared because I felt like keeping it hidden was stopping myself from being able to connect with other people and being able to let myself be vulnerable and open, but also sharing. I wanted to connect with other people because I knew so many people went through very, very similar situations. But it was also kind of empowering to share a story, to be vulnerable, to be heard, and to be listened to, and also kind of learn from that story. So this was the story that I shared. And I want to now kind of talk about the art of storytelling. And when I say art, I don't mean art as in any form of like a pretense of it. I think of it as a method or a vessel of us using something to get from that inside space of us and let that inside space come out, almost like become physical. So storytelling, Sarah Noble, who is what we call a humanitarian storyteller and peace-building communications practitioners, says that we are hardwired for stories because stories are how we make sense of the world. She talks a lot about how storytelling is not just communication, and it's not just an art or a trend, and it's definitely not something new. It is something that human beings have been doing since the beginning. And the best part of it is that we can all do it. We are all storytellers. And storytelling is how we make sense of the world, imagine what is possible, and move from fear into action. So a story is not just about something that has happened. A story is what happens when we take an experience and ask, what did this make me feel? What did this teach me about me? What choice did it reveal? What did it change in me? And what does it help me understand about being human? Sarah Noble tells the story during one of her lectures about a tiny little hummingbird. And I have a picture of that, a little hummingbird, in case you may have not seen it before. So in this story, there is a huge fire in the forest. And all the animals are just standing around, kind of feeling very overwhelmed and helpless. They don't know what to do. They're just watching their home, being burnt. But this one little hummingbird flies back and forth, carrying tiny drops of water to the fire. The other animals, kind of laugh at this tiny little bird doing what seems to be like a useless act. I mean, what is this tiny droplet going to do to this huge fire that is burning the whole forest? They say to this little bird, they say, this fire is too big, and you are just so small. What difference can you make? And this little hummingbird replies, you know what? I'm just doing the best I can. I love that. And I love this story. And it's a story that is, it's not too complicated. But it kind of it gets down to this feeling that we all know that, we're all so small, almost too small in a world that seems very large. And sometimes the problems we are facing in our world, or the problems of the world, just feel too big. But the meaning in the story is just take whatever you want from it. But the meaning I get is that even if the problems we see around us, or the world around us, feels so incredibly large, there is a point for us. There is something we can still do, and at least that little thing can be sharing our stories. One of the things Sarah Noble also mentions is that stories have this power to move us from paralysis and fear to courageous hope and action. So when we tell our stories, we're not just describing life, we are deciding what life means. Let us talk a little bit about connection. So just I'm going to give you a few seconds. I want you to just write down in the chat what you think connection means, especially when it relates to stories. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, so the definition I really like when it comes to connection is what happens when a story lets someone feel with you and not just listen to you. There's a there's a difference between being listened to and being actually heard. When people are heard, there is there's almost, you can feel this bond being created between you and the hearer. This emotional feeling of feeling understood, maybe not fully, but this be feeling some kind of, in some essence, understood, just empowers both you as the storyteller and the hearer. So when we listen to our stories, our brains begin to couple with the brain of the person telling it. It's almost as if we are experiencing as a hearer what is being described, kind of living through it with the storyteller. Stories allow us to experience things we may never have experienced and to travel to places we have never been, whether that's physical or emotional landscapes. Um, there's also a communications expert and somebody, a researcher in the field, David J.P. Phillips, and he says storytelling creates this phrase, emotional investment. So that is when how stories can help people focus, remember, trust, bond, and feel empathy. So in storytelling, you create empathy. In that, you are creating emotional investment. So when we're storytelling is very, very different from what we call an opinion. An opinion can make people feel like they want to debate with you. So they don't have that emotional connection to you. And so they don't feel emotionally invested in what you're saying. They may only feel some kind of emotion. That is when they want to argue. So the kind of emotions they're feeling are not empathetic. They're more of an argumentative, maybe even a bit of an anger line. So, but when a story makes somebody else feel, that is when the connection begins. What is one thing that David Phillips is a big advocate for, and I am a big advocate for as well, is that he says that everybody is a good storyteller from birth. The only problem is that you don't believe in that. So it's not that you do not have that inherent capability to tell a story. It's that your own belief is keeping that storytelling foundation within yourself, that talent of yourself, that desire, that need to tell a story. You are the one keeping it from flourishing and coming out. So that means that you do not need to become a storyteller today, during or after our workshop. You are already a storyteller. You have been collecting stories your whole life, stories about your name, your home, your language, your friendship, your fears, I don't know, your questions you may be having about life and your role in it, your dreams, your mistakes, and maybe some of the most courageous things you have done. One of the things we usually falter when sharing our story is that we come back to this question of not whether we are storytellers or whether we have a story, but whether our story is impressive enough, is good enough, or whether it will entertain people enough when we share it. But instead, what we should be asking is whether our story is true and is it true to ourselves? Whether it influenced us, whether it made us feel something, whether it taught us something. And that is what is enough. That is enough for our story to be worth sharing. I want to talk about what is called personal narratives. And those are stories of your own stories. So Jensen, who is a documentary filmmaker, his work focuses on the lives of real people. And during an interview, he once shared that this line, "Your life has marked you in unique ways." He says that these marks shape what quests you pursue and what you are equipped to say with passion and authority. He explains that our marks, so our emotional experiences, and maybe some of the tensions or complications we have gone through, form the backbone of our personal narratives. So he says, your personal narrative is the story formed by these marks, the questions and the memories and experiences that have influenced who you are at this moment of your life and what you are here to say. And this moment you will never experience again. The stories you have at this moment will evolve and change, even tomorrow and the next few weeks and the next year. What I find so fascinating about my work is that I can interview someone today, and then if I interview them again in a year's time, the story they share with me today can become not foundationally, it can stay the same, but there will be elements that will differ, because the story is not, like we mentioned, the story is not just about what happened, but about how it happened to you and how this story has gone through you and come out. And so you may have a very different understanding of those experiences in a year's time. So the way you're going to say it and with the words you're going to use to tell that story is going to be very different, and maybe even more connected to the truth that you believe at that point. So just to clarify, your personal narrative is not a perfect biography. It's not your CV. So I don't want to know, it's not supposed to be a list of your achievements and accomplishments in life. It is a deeper, you can say, pattern of our life. I want you to just take a moment and think about what has marked you in your life, what has moved you, what questions about your life and about life in general do you keep returning to? What have you learned because of where you come from? What do you understand now because of what you have lived? And then this brings us to one of my favorite words, and that is the simple I. An I story is a story only you can tell from inside. And when I say I'm not saying that my story is the only story. I'm saying that this is the story I can tell truthfully at this very moment. I remember, I felt, I feared, I wanted, I learned, I choose. For many girls around the world, the word I can feel dangerous. I want to say I want, to say I think, to say I disagree, to even say I dream of something different, to say I'm proud of who I am, to say I am afraid to let other people know that there you had fear to say, I need more than what is being given to me, to say, I choose. Sometimes girls are taught to soften the I, to apologize for it, to even hide it, to say maybe when they mean yes, or maybe when they say no, to say we when they actually mean I, to say it does not matter, even when it does matter. What is important to know is that the I is not selfish. I want you to understand that the I is just a place of responsibility. The I says that this is what I saw, this is what I felt, this is what I learned, and this is what I now choose, and I take responsibility for my I. What I want from you is to find the marks, your unique marks, and to own them, to look back over your lives and notice the moments when you were moved by strong emotion, fear, joy, anger, worry, and anticipation. And these emotions are clues to the life that has been left on you, the life of that time that you can still remember, almost like triggers, starters of stories. A mark might be a wound, but it might also be a question. It could be a dream, a place, a language, a person, a book, a poem, a moment when you realize that you are changing. It could be a time that you wanted to speak up, but you were too afraid to. A time that you felt you did not belong somewhere, even though you really, really wanted to. You just felt a little bit too different. Time when you wanted to leave, but you loved your home too much, or the comforts that you were in at that moment. Maybe a time you wanted to be brave, but you doubted yourself. Those moments are not problems in your story. They're the first sentence of the stories you could write, you could share. So I just want to talk about a little bit about, just to reiterate that personal narratives, when we share personal narratives, we are not talking about what happened to me. We can also be talking about collective narratives that have also become your narratives, whether that is stories from your family history or the family challenges that you have experienced or inherited, the language you've inherited, whether, the migration stories you've inherited, the childhoods and traditions of your family that have been passed down to you, the memories of maybe your great-great-grandfathers that now you hold and carry. These personal narratives are not just what happened to you, but also what stories you inherited, what stories have influenced the way your families interact and go through life. The stories that, why your country is maybe acts the way it does. What stories did you grow up hearing, believing, and taking in? And what stories you actually want to carry forward? Maybe you are reconsidering those stories and you want to move away, or you now understand those stories in a very different light. What stories do you want to rewrite? So I know we don't have that much time, but I'm just going to give you a minute or two. Just think about what I called the 6 I sentences. Just for yourself, I want you to finish these I sentences. You could just even take them down and do it after the workshop. The 6 I sentences begin with I remember, I felt, I wanted, I was afraid, that I learned, I am becoming. And this could be just about one moment that happened to you, or one of these unique marks we were talking about. It could be something as simple as I remember when my grandmother was sharing this, and during that time I felt this. I wanted to say this, but I was afraid that she would do this. What I learned from that is this, and I'm becoming to appreciate this. Yeah, so you can, I think, during your own private moments, I would really encourage you to use these prompts when you're thinking about your personal and just unique stories that you have, to just dive a little bit deeper into them. You really, especially at this time that you're writing privately, you really do not need to worry about making it beautiful or using correct grammar or beautiful or, fancy language or words. You don't even have to write in English. You can write in your own first language. You understand that even the smallest stories are real stories. So we talked.
While we are waiting, it also has a very interesting question: how we have to stop comparing yourself with different people due to our stories, due to our messages, and so on. Maybe we have some questions, and to answer the girls which we had previously, it's also very interesting to create these borders, yes, because this is very interesting practice, and how we could separate our stories from different stories.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, comparison. Well, I would say comparison is kind of a story problem. So if we're talking about sharing story, and if we hear somebody else's experience and there is this comparison going on from you, it's telling us that the edited story, because whenever somebody is sharing something, there is a little bit of editing going on. We are trying to compare what happened to us, which we see very raw, and we can see the different threads of our own stories. We're trying to compare it to somebody's very edited, sometimes overly flowery story. So we see someone else's maybe confidence, or I don't know, success, beauty, the way they speak, the language they use, the grades, their followers, the opportunities they've been given in life. But we don't see the whole story. We don't see maybe the fear that is plaguing them throughout their life, maybe the loneliness, the family pressures, their insecurity and their private failures. We all have this bias towards negative narratives about ourselves. So then usually the stories we tell about ourselves don't even match who we actually are. We're constantly saying, oh yeah, this person is better than me. But instead of that, I feel like we should be talking about, like I said, have this compassionate kindness to ourselves, and instead of asking, why am I not like them, asking, what do they show me about what I care about? So if maybe you're feeling envy towards someone's voice and the confidence they have, it just shows that having a voice matters to you. And why not use that if you realize that that is something that is really important to you? Use that as information instead of punishment. and seek ways that you can empower yourself to use your own voice and find that voice inside you and to let that out. And so I think, and also we all compare ourselves. And so it's not, I don't think we should punish ourselves for the act of feeling that you want to compare yourself, but use that more as information, as starting points of another story. Do you want me, should we answer another question?
Yeah, just continue. Yes, it was very interesting.
So I think another question we had was, have you ever regretted sharing something a little bit too personal and how you handled that? And yes, I think I've had quite a few moments, especially during the early days when I started. I was very much involved in what we call poetry slam competitions, where you use a very personal story of yourself. You rewrite that into a poem, and you learn it and you go compete on stage. And especially during that time, the poetry slam culture in where I was that I was involved in, there was this almost competition of who can be the most vulnerable, who can share the most like shock factor story, the most hooky story. And so I did fall into the trap of sharing things I honestly did not feel like I felt I should have. I was not ready to be so open about that. Um, so there was a period where I then started to draw back and I just didn't want to share anymore. I stopped competing. I stopped attending as many events as I used to because I needed that time for me. Which is not saying that I regret it, but I just felt I was not at that point. I was not ready to be that vulnerable on stage. Like now, I feel like if I shared those stories at this point in my life, I would not have that much regret or that need to um, retreat as much. I am in a position where I am so much more confident in the openness I can stand in. So I think the lesson is come into tune with yourself and understand how vulnerable you feel you can be without overstepping your own boundaries, because vulnerability is not just about sharing a story just for the sake of story. Vulnerability also involves a lot of timing, trust with the hearer of your story, and the boundaries you have. So I think when you are sharing what you think is a very deep story, something you may not have shared previously or in a very small group of people, take the time to look inward, because it's a very healthy practice to do so, and do so with care and compassion, without trying not to think of what you feel is like the expectation of you in sharing, but think of your own kind of desires to do so, and think about who is going to be hearing. Is it the right person to hear that story at that moment of your life? And how much you are ready to share. And don't feel like there's one thing. Don't fall into the trap of thinking there needs to be a deadline. There is a very specific time that everyone needs to share at before moving on to something else. You have your whole life to share vulnerable moments. Take the time to go on that journey to share as much as you can at that moment, and understand that you can share more later on as you grow into your truth and into your story. And I think that is my answer for that one. I think Estelle shared a few more questions. So Estelle says, when we share our deepest vulnerabilities, how can we tell the difference between a moment of true healing connection and simply oversharing? That's a very good one. And how do we protect our hearts while still using our personal stories as our greatest strengths? Okay, I will start with the first one, which is how can we tell the difference between a moment of truth and healing connection and simply oversharing? I think it's coming back to what I mentioned previously, to understand what is the purpose of you sharing the story. Are you trying to connect at that moment? Are you trying to connect to yourself? Are you trying to use your storytelling practice not only to, maybe grow a bond with someone and allow yourself to deepen a relationship with somebody through this sharing practice, but also are you doing service to yourself and being kind to yourself, and using this storytelling practice and being able to be vulnerable to grow your own understanding of the stories inside you and to help yourselves grow more? Or is it just because you are maybe falling into a trap of, well, she shared this, and so I have to go to that same level of what I think vulnerability means, or that same level of storytelling practice. So I think that is a very inward practice that may need to happen very quickly if you are experiencing that time. But what I would also encourage you to do is kind of take a moment, take a deep breath, and kind of understand and try to connect with the emotions you're feeling at that moment. If you're feeling nervous, that is a signal your body is sending you to, probably not the best time, not in an emotionally stable place right now, and I need to think about this a little bit deeper. I need some time to myself to analyze and to connect with myself, probably during a quiet moment when I'm alone and not in this setting. So if you're not feeling at total peace sharing, I would say step back. Don't go there. Give yourself time. There's always a next time to share. And your second question is, how do we protect our hearts while still using our personal stories as our greatest strength? And in that is, as I said, you are all on a journey of starting to be more open. Start small and build up as your confidence grows. There's no expectation on you from anybody else, and there shouldn't be any expectation of you to be exposed before you are ready. Start with sharing lighter stories about your life. And as you start to feel more confident and you start to build that connection with people, you can add a little bit more. It's kind of like the hare and turtle story, isn't it? Where, the hare runs, and he tries to finish the race, and he just tries to go for a sprint, whereas the tortoise, sorry, takes it slow. He knows that he is running his own race. He knows what pace he needs to go in order to finish it. He's not looking at any of the other competitors. He is there for himself. And that's what you need to be doing. You are there in your storytelling journey for yourself and not for anybody else. So go at your own pace and go at the pace that you feel comfortable in. All right. I think, yeah. Thank you, Estelle, for the question.
before we wrap up, a quick reminder, if you would love the energy today, and if you understand that you want to continue, so please don't hesitate to join the FAMS 3.0 program, which will start in the start of the autumn this year. And with those who are already in our FAM community, we will see at the FAM camp in Cyprus. So see you soon. Also, thank you for our colleagues who also been here and support us. Annetta, thanks one more time, and see you soon.